Okay, great.
Shall we clap first, or?
Yeah, we should clap first. Good point, Bob.
Hey.
Okay, good. It's videos on me. Videos on me.
Videos on me. Videos on me. That's awesome.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, James. How you doing?
Doing good, man. Okay, so we are sitting down to have a conversation about a topic. We were in the Marco Polo app sending videos back and forth, and you made a suggestion of having an Improv FAQ episode on group games, which I thought was a really great idea. And then we started chit-chatting about it, and we thought it would be fun to record a conversation just kind of going over why that would be a great topic, and maybe even flesh out some ideas along the way to answer the frequently asked questions about group games. So the first thing I thought we could do is kind of define what group games are, what we're talking about, but also because in general, I guess as a little preamble here, there's a lot of shit in improv vocab that is confusing, which we were kind of talking about as a side topic, and game is one of them. Yeah, because I mean you got short form games and game of the scene and group games.
Your character game, like a personal game that only your character plays.
Yep, you can have a game of the show. You can have like beats of a game. You know.
Yeah, your form itself can be a game. You know. So.
Yeah. I was also just thinking. You know, I was working on an episode about long form forms and being pissed off that long form is the style of improv and that the sub performance packages that we have are called forms. It's like we don't say short form games like.
Oh, just think about the word beats. The beats of a scene. Beats is a measurement of time, or something you'd call an event.
Yeah.
Oh, give it a couple of beats, or give it a pregnant pause. You know.
Yeah. So anyway, games is one of those confusing, ambiguous vocab terms in improv, and so we are talking about group games. I suppose the most commonly represented form of it would be in Heralds, where you have a palate cleansing group game. And you were saying that it's kind of hard to describe, maybe not the difference, but like the open possibilities beyond that being really a scene. Go ahead.
Yes, because like we're giving stuff in the syllabus like, oh, you know, it's more of a performance piece. So think about make a machine without the rules, or, you know, and I think people find stuff in like warm-up games that they use rather than trying to really just do something organic. You know,
yeah.
They'd rather do 1001 or sing or invent a song or a rhythm, but they don't really push that, because I think that's scary to go farther than or go into a place that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I feel you. So one thing that we'll talk about is organic group games, and yeah, kind of stepping into the unknown, unfamiliar right at the top of this crazy group performance thing, and figuring out what shape it's going to take as you go. In my experience, one of the things moving to New York that I thought was interesting is that typically group games, people are referring to what I thought of as group scenes, which is that you have, you know, like a boardroom meeting or like a cafeteria line, or just anything where, you know, there's a meeting of the union, like town hall.
Yeah, town hall.
Yeah. And there's characters interacting with each other, and that to me is a group scene. It's just a scene that happens to involve everybody in the cast. And when I thought of group games, I thought of something different, that wasn't really a scene, not necessarily character based, people not always interacting with each other or having like a linear sense of time in the scene, and being more like performance, abstract, interpretive, and there are ways of doing that are set, or kind of common. There's things like a cocktail party where you have pockets of people on the stage that are in different conversations like you would have at a party. And that's not really a scene. It's not as abstract as some other group games, but like, it's like a type of thing that you might find yourself in that.
It's more of a character study at that point.
Sure. Yeah. Or you could be exploring like intertwining ideas in conversations and unrelated conversations. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a SoundCloud almost.
Yeah. Or you could do like scene painting and things that we're a little bit more familiar with. And there's that stuff that you use as like examples or like templates of a group game. And then there's also the organic, completely made up on the spot. The concept as well as the execution of it is made up as you go.
Yeah, which I think that latter is scary to people because you're out of your comfort zone, and I think people worry about the audience a little too much when they do that because they're thinking in their head, what is everybody watching this thinking?
Yeah.
What are they getting out of this? What's the entertainment value? When, again, like you mentioned before, it's just a palate cleanser. It's just something, just something unique. It's more of a performance piece than a story. Because if you're doing a Herald, you're basically telling a 3-part story, So this is just, I don't know, a transition to the next phase.
Yeah, I think that it doesn't need to be... It's really like two extremes. It doesn't need to be coherent. It doesn't need to have be 3-dimensional and have like a strong sense of story. Also, doesn't need to be bonkers and chaotic and kind of wishy-washy. There's a place in the middle where you can find clarity in what's going on, but without having to use the tools that we use in a scene as a crutch, But
yeah, and actually, I like those a lot better because even I don't think even an audience member who isn't trained, it kind of gets conditioned throughout the show what the show is. So to give them something that's nothing like the show, it has value within itself.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and unlike a movie where you can still enjoy a movie, but kind of know where it's going and predict the ending. When you add an element like this, and especially to a first-time audience member, I think that has value within itself because it's like, I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm enjoying it. I think it's a really great feeling.
Yeah. It brings dynamics and surprise to the show. Because anything is possible in improv, and so I think that like one of the cool things about group games is that they really take, or I should say, non-scenic group games. I think that's a fair title to put on the type of games that we're mainly talking about. It's not really group scenes that are equivalent to group games, but non-scenic group games, whether they are familiar or organic. So a non-scenic group game is a really great opportunity to take advantage of what improv has to offer and the kind of like abstract, imagination-driven possibilities on stage when you don't have costumes and set pieces and you got everybody going for group mind. I feel like without having that, or at least everybody being willing and comfortable with going into those performance modes, you're missing out on something that is really special about improv.
Yeah, totally unique to us. Because I would imagine this would happen to you more in New York than out in Detroit. I wonder if there's a comparison to a new audience member. Who would they compare improv to? You know, because they're going to the theater to like a play. You know, and that's what a Herald looks like if it's done correctly, like a play that's never been written. So to add that weird element to it, like kind of makes it unique.
Yeah, makes it something else.
And if a newer audience member is looking at this and they're truly comparing it to theater, they might not see the value in improvised dialogue because they've been conditioned to, oh, when I see this on a stage, it's something that's clean and being rehearsed and just, you know, no flaws. You know, you want the audience to watch it and be like, oh, I see the advantage in the possibilities with improv, as opposed to like, I'm impressed that it was improvised. You guys should probably write that so you can do it every time. Right. Yeah, that's the best compliment we ever get. Plus, it will allow them to forgive us for not having the props or stage pieces or, you know, wardrobe.
Yeah, exactly. Forgive us, and because we're taking advantage of it. Like we're going to use the fact that we don't have those to do something boundless. With what's on stage. Two things, just because you brought up the narrative thing. I think that people. It is interesting in New York. There's a lot more genre-based and narrative-based improv when people make specialty shows to try and like make an indie production out of. A lot of it is narrative, and so there's a lot of I don't know how long it's been this way because I have only been here for a few years, but it seems like that's a little bit easier to pitch. Maybe is that like improvised fill in the blank. Is then that you're going to see a narrative show is easier to sell. It has like a built-in concept to it, and I think that people are doing really great things with it. I also think that on top of the conversation of keeping things dynamic, taking advantage of improv, one of the things that is a comedy tool is surprise. I was watching this interview with Jerry Seinfeld, and he was saying, somebody in the audience asked, is there anything consistent across all jokes that you can say is like guaranteed to be included in a joke? And Jerry was like, I gotta say surprise. Every joke, every laugh has an element of surprise to it. And so I think that when you start doing scenes on stage that are more familiar to an audience, and then you do this non-scenic group game, you're part of the dynamics, and the advantage of it is that you're keeping the audience on their toes, and you have this element of surprise that something unexpected is happening that isn't really a scene, but is still everybody operating together in this theatrical performance.
Exactly. The surprise is our prestige. Actually,
yeah.
And like, that's the great thing about, just to go off, piggyback on what you're saying. Yeah, putting improvise in front of any genre makes it slightly more interesting because it's something that people are familiar with, and like, but what are they going to do with it?
Yeah.
Improvised horror film. Well, I know what a horror film is, but what are they going to do with it? Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I think somehow making it your own and using all the tools of improv at your disposal to do it it has got to include those non-scenic group games, or at least those are a great option for how to put your mark on it.
And it's kind of like why I enjoy doing them in the first place, because when you get into them, you have to ask yourself, like, where's this going? And then you just have to surrender and say, I don't know. Let's find out.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's kind of frame a transition into that conversation about how to approach them and a little bit about how to explain them.
Okay.
To students or anybody. Because I think what we've done is kind of laid out, again, the difference between scenes and scenes, things that are scenes, things that are not scenes, and we're going to be talking about non-scenic group games. But I think it's also fair to point out that like, so a scene is going to involve characters interacting with each other in a way that's familiar to the audience in theater. Tends to be a fixed location and sequence of time where characters are interacting with each other and not with the audience. And with non-scenic show segments, including non-scenic group games, you have this possibility of either not involving characters or having a sense of character, but not necessarily interacting with each other, possibly interacting with the audience, possibly performing in third person without a fourth wall, and take things a little bit more in an innovative direction or an unfamiliar territory. And that is part of the purpose of it, is to, do theater that is less familiar in representation.
Is that it?
Yeah, man. So that you're playing like what would you? Because I'm just trying to like figure out. One, you can do a 2-person scene. You can do a full cast scene of like 8 or more people. You can do a non-scenic group game, which is mainly what we want to talk about. But you can also do a non-scenic 2-person game or performance. I remember this is like so many degrees removed, but I remember Garrett Fuller was talking about one of his favorite memories of Tim Robinson improvising was that Tim's doing a show and somebody steps out and does like a car noise and it's like and it's probably like a rookie student or something that's doing their own sound effects or whatever. But Tim comes out and goes, "You want to have a sound effects off?" And then just starts making like rocket noises and like pew pew and makes it like a battle of sound effects. And that's not a scene. That's just 2 improvisers having fun back and forth with how they can heighten crazy sound effects. So you can still have a non-scenic part of the show that isn't necessarily a group game is all I'm saying.
No, I totally agree. And I think the only thing I ever notice about group games, like organic ones, they just find a rhythm and a pace, and then that gets played with.
Yeah.
It starts off, it's almost like in music talk, like just having a jam session. Like you're just, someone starts off with a beat, and then someone adds their horns, and then someone adds their bass, and then you have a little jam going. And then, if you're playing jazz, you can switch it up and see who follows who.
Yeah, so let's talk about the approach to finding or creating a game, and maybe we can do it as a comparison between in a scene versus in non-scenic situation. Because it's both of them, which you pointed out in our previous talk, is both are still going to be about establishing patterns. Like you're still just looking to establish patterns.
Absolutely. So, like, how would you establish one?
Yeah, like how do you think about the difference and similarities between establishing a game in a scene versus establishing a game in a non-scenic group game or in an organic game?
I think for me personally, like when I'm starting something, as weird as it sounds, like if I'm going out there to start an organic game, I try to go out there with nothing, absolutely nothing. Just, oh man. I listen to my stomach or my heart, and the first thing that comes out of my mouth, I just go with. Just follow my body. When I'm going to improvise like something scenic, I usually go out there with some idea, even if it's just like a character, and I have a little bit more locked. And then I wait for my partner to join in and then discover what it's going to be. So it's subtle.
Yeah. But you come out. What about if you're not the first person to initiate. So that's interesting. So you a little difference is that like you have less of an idea of what you're going to do, even if you're the one initiating it. If it's non-scenic, you have a little bit of an idea if it's scenic, and maybe it's based on what's happened so far in the show or the suggestion or whatever. But you're coming out with a little bit of something.
Because when you get that or you come out, you're inspired. So when you're inspired, you have a little bit more of a thought to it. Like you're a little more attached by being inspired. When you're going totally organic, no suggestion, no nothing, you just go out there and just make a big, bold choice.
Yeah, which I think is part of the reason that it's considered a palate cleanser is because you're really just the performers and the audience and the show is trying to shake off any tethers.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
That might be bogging it down and just kind of keep things freed up again for creativity's sake. So that's interesting. What about on the other side of it? If you are, if you're not the person to initiate it, but you're still looking to establish and confirm a pattern, how do you look for that pattern in a scene versus in a non-scenic game?
Well, if in a scene, it's a little easier because in a scene is a little bit harder for me because I have to honor everything that's been established. So I have to really consider, make sure you're not accidentally denying something. If like a big mistake students sometimes make if a male establishes a female character walking out and calling them dad. So you have to honor everything that's been established. With something totally organic, I take the first step of an organic game as a suggestion. So now whatever that person is doing on stage is something that's supposed to inspire me. So there's no wrong choice. There's nothing really much I have to honor but my own inspiration.
Yeah, that's interesting. Definitely keeping the information straight in a scene is a bigger task in scenes. I know in a group game, non-scenic, there's more of a sense to me of throwing caution to the wind, whether I'm the first or second person out. I'm just like, if I'm the first person out, I'm just doing anything like you. I'm just like,
absolutely.
Whatever comes to me, I try to do something physical. Second person, my goal, I love being the second person because I don't have an idea of where it's going to go most of the time. If I'm adding to somebody else's wild choice like that, my goal is to just kind of like jump on the grenade or not leave them alone. Like I'm just like, I'm going to jump in your world too, which I think, is generally the thing of improv, but it has a different feeling when when I know that it's unknown and I'm just like, I'm going to get in here too. The third, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead, please.
If I'm and if you have like an 8-person scene and you're kind of like trickling people into what's going on stage, it won't necessarily happen 1, 2, 3 like this. But I'm just saying, like, you're either initiating, you're adding and getting yourself in the mix, or you're kind of affirming some kind of pattern or pushing it in some direction. If I'm that third person, hopefully by seeing what's going on, I'm like, there's a clarity of like, oh, like we're all types of bugs or like this is things people say and feel when they're apologizing, you know what I mean? Or like, it's becoming a cloud. But if I see that, then I'm happy to like push into it and try to affirm the pattern. But that doesn't always happen, and that's what's scary.
Yeah. Well, that's why I love being the second person, because you have the power. Basically, if you just want to mirror but heighten, like, someone initiates doing a jumping jack. Great. If I go up there and do the exact same jumping jack next to the person, but faster and with a big smile on my face, your scene partner is going to appreciate it because they don't know what's going on. But now it makes a little more sense. Yeah. And B, the audience is like, oh, we're in for it now. And it's such a simple action you're doing. And then by the third or fourth person, all they have to do is follow suit.
Yeah.
So that second person's really important because it really defines, the first person's like, hey, let's play a game. And the second person's like, I'm all in.
Yes.
Here's some of the rules.
Yeah. It's just a pure support move. It's like one of the purest situations you can find yourself in where you're just like, I'm with you.
On the second half of that, I get so annoyed when I see the first person initiate, second person do the thing, third person do their version of the first person, the second person, and then the fourth person stand on the back line. Like, you don't know how to do a jumping jack? Come on, man. You're killing me.
Yeah. And that's another special thing about group games, right? Or non-scenic group games is that not only do you have the special quality of it breaking the mold of a scene, but you also have this opportunity for the whole cast to get on stage. And if everyone does participate, it's great. And even if it's kind of wonky, it's much better than it would be if somebody's hanging back or holding back. And you're more likely, because like I was saying, I don't always have this epiphany of like, oh, this is what it is. This is the moment of clarity that I think is what's happening and how we can make this into a clear pattern. It's more likely to happen with the more people involved, in that non-scenic group scenario.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, I know we're talking about group games, but it's kind of like monologues or character solo moments on stage. I think can also have that same element of like, oh, it's something dynamic that can happen in an improv show, and not only because if you have one person, you're going to break the mold of a scene pretty much by default, but it's also the unusual number that you don't see. You don't usually see one person in most shows or even most improv shows. So whether that's kind of like your two ends of the spectrum is like having moments where there was one person on stage or having moments when there was everyone on stage.
Well, that's so interesting to me because we teach walk-ons, walkthroughs, and walk-offs during the same week, at least in the program I teach.
Yeah.
But you watch the class show and you'll see 300 walk-ons, maybe a couple walk-throughs, but you'll almost never see a walk-off.
Yeah.
and it kills me. Like, I would love, and especially like a newer students you fall into that trap of, oh, it's a two-person scene. Let's have an argument. What if halfway through the argument, the other person left?
Yeah.
And if you established who you are to each other, and hopefully like you're playing with that rule, like everybody cares about each other, even if you're enemies. If that person leaves and just, goes backstage, what's the guy on stage going to do? If you're looking for a power move, there's no better one than that. But also if you're looking for a place to shine and when that person leaves, go into a monologue or just show how hurt you are that this is not resolved or, just show what the relationship was. I think that'd be an incredible moment, and we rarely get to see that.
Yeah, I agree. It's tricky. I mean, we could probably have a whole conversation about those kind of solo moments or unusual moments that are really powerful, but feel really vulnerable because you in that situation, especially for students, you got to have everyone not only doing everything out of honest support and gift to each other in the show, but you have to have everyone feeling and trusting each other that that's what's happening. Because if two students are on stage and halfway through the scene, one student walks off in the middle of a show or in the middle of a scene in class, even if the person who left is like, wow, I feel honestly compelled to do this, and I'm giving my partner a moment to shine and see what they can do with this moment alone on stage, I'm opening that door for them. There's also the possibility that the person who gets left behind is like, what the fuck? Like, what am I supposed to do? Scene, I'm done. Bye. So you have to have both people feeling comfortable and doing it for the right reasons in order to really take advantage of it. But that's all the more reason why if you are starting to play with a team, that these moments of solo moments on stage or group moments are that much more special, because it's not easy to get to that point of everyone feeling that comfortable to let those things happen.
Exactly. And that's why I wish more teams would rehearse, because you don't rehearse to become a better improviser. I mean, that's a byproduct, but the main part is just learning each other and learning how to get on that same page quicker, like a shorthand. So when that does happen, it's not like, oh, Bob's mad at me. Like, oh, no, that's what his character wanted to do, and that's the way Bob plays.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm just gonna have to deal with it, and do my thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It does. It takes rehearsal can only help to get familiar with people and try things out in a lower stakes situation. Let's talk about the difference between openers and group games, if you feel like there is a strong difference. Like if you have a show where you have I'm trying to think of an example of a group opener, but scene painting, everybody comes out and contributes to describing the environment on stage as a group opener, and that's not scenic because everyone's talking from a meta point of view.
Right. But you kind of know what you're getting into when you go into it, because that's part of your form usually, unless it's like totally open. Like, well, I mean, like when we used to play with Javelin, we would go, "What's our opener?" I don't know. Let's find out.
yeah. Well, isn't that what we used to say with Javelin, which is a 3-person troupe. We were like, we want to have an opener. We don't want to say exactly what it is, but I think the rule was the first part of the show is not a scene, and there's no sweep edits in the show, and that's those were our rules.
Yeah, that's all you need, buddy.
Yeah.
And those are fun. And I think the difference is like having something organic like that is, again, just like establishment, and then I always play from the place of what is happening. Let's go. It's just as myself, as the performer, taking everything that's going on as fast as possible, because you don't want that lag.
Yeah.
And then either mirroring it or heightening it in any way I possibly can.
Yeah.
And hopefully by adding to it, establishing a pattern that we might not discover until we do it a couple times and find that rhythm.
Yeah. So, I guess with openers, you could have an organic group opener, like I mean, 3 people for Javelin, but still that was our thing.
Yeah.
But I know that there's larger teams that have not, organic openers that are not predetermined. You can also have predetermined openers that you might have other teams or in a different show put later in the show. But there's definitely something different between kind of like having the set expectation inside of the team of like, our opener is we do a 3rd-person narrative of non-human things. So we narrate the growth of a tree, or we narrate the life of a house, whatever. These are my ideas. Yeah. We narrate the life of a star. But when you know beforehand as a group that that's what's supposed to happen, we're going to narrate something, and it's going to be not a human that we're narrating. There's a little bit more pressure to stick to that, which is probably good for kind of operating within parameters. But with organic stuff, which are typically the ones that happen in the middle of a show, you have a little bit more freedom to break all expectations, because that's part of the point. Do you feel like where do you stand on, like, if you have a set idea for either an opener or like built into your form, that like at the halfway point, once we've done 3 2-person scenes, we do a cocktail party? Like, how quick are you as a player to, if it's not going that way, or if you see the possibility to kind of break the rule you set out for yourselves, how quick are you to follow that path away from the intention?
It really depends on how comfortable I am with the rest of the people. If it's a troop that me, you, and a couple other people put together, established, and we kind of make up these rules in your basement one night when we're drinking, I don't think I honor those as well as, hey, I got hired by this theater to do a particular show, and that's the form. I kind of stick to that a little bit more, unless it's like on its 10th week, and we're all a little more comfortable. It's really up to, I guess, my security. And it's kind of, just to be honest, like if I'm getting paid for it, that plays into it. Not that happens a lot. But
we paid you to do a goddamn cocktail party, Bob.
Yeah. When I auditioned for this or got hired or whatever, what was their expectation? So I want to live up to the expectation of what the theater wants from me. But if I think I can do a play or do a move, and I don't know how much thought I actually give it, because but if I feel, but if my gut really is screaming for me to do something, I can't not do it. I can't avoid. It's gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's like sparingly too. You can't do it every time, or you kind of like that's. I'm just speaking for myself now. I guess is that like if I did it last time, I'm more likely to contain my impulse this time.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
But if I contain my impulse the last few times, this time I'm going for it.
Yeah, I'm too much of an antagonist not to do it. I gotta listen to my gut, because that's just the kind of player I am.
That's a good point too. Is you mentioned the expectation of the show. I think that does. If you, whether it's the theater or the director or the mission of the group or whatever, that might be things that are kind of internal. But also if you brand a show, like UCB has Herald Night. And so it'd be weird to see something that was distinctly not Herald on that night, right? Or if your intro to the show is like, we're going to do XYZ, and then you deviate from that, it's a little harder to feel good about it because you just told everyone what to expect.
Yeah, I think what I was talking about was more about my fellow performers too.
Gotcha.
I don't want to do those moves like, oh, if I'm supposed to open a show and I told them and we rehearsed it and they are expecting a particular thing from me, if I just have a wacky idea in the car on the way there, I'm not going to do that.
Gotcha.
I'll tell them about it later. Like, I had this thought in the car. Wouldn't that have been funny? And then maybe on week 7, I might try.
Yeah, gotcha. Gotcha.
Just so everybody's comfortable, Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay.
I was trying to think of an example there. Wacky Bob.
Wacky Bob and his journal of wacky notes that he never pulled up.
I have a wall in my office. Like, oh, remember when I almost?
Yeah. Remember when those are your favorite moments? Is the things that you almost did.
I thought of this. No one will ever see it.
Last thing I'll say about openers is that I guess the opener is more functional, right? Because you have to pull. Generally, the idea is to pull bits of it to be used right after or deeper in the show. Whereas, again, the group game is more about like this. This is just a fuck off for the next, 2 minutes,
right?
And meant to shake everybody off. So you're not supposed to really be using it, or it doesn't have to be coming from anywhere. In particular. Yeah, so I guess let's bring the conversation to a close here just to make sure that we take care of the most important thing that we set out to do, which is answer the question of what is a group game, an organic, non-scenic group game, what's a good way to describe that to people, to students? What do you have like a better idea after kind of talking through some stuff of like what to point to?
So, in group game is as far as a game within a scene, or
a non-scenic group game. Like if you're trying to explain to students you're going to do a Herald walkthrough, and you want them to do organic. Excuse me. And you want them to do organic group games. What do you tell them that they're trying to do? What was the goal?
Okay. Well, I explain it. It's so your goal is to organically come up with a performance piece that doesn't have any story or actual real fleshed out characters. That doesn't even necessarily need dialogue. It should start with an action, and then an action should be heightened and then continued or changed organically, almost more like an exercise than like the beats of a normal scene, establishment, what makes it a different, heightening, and conclusion. So I would like to somehow come up with a way to explain it that doesn't sound so technical. It's all of this, but it's also none of that.
Yeah. I think for me the main difference is that the characters aren't interacting with each other. I think that would be the probably the main challenge that I would give to students is that like you can have characters, they can't interact with each other. And then if that seems like a crutch or doesn't do it, I'll be like, okay, now you can't have characters.
I like that.
And just to kind of throw some examples out there, because I was making note of them as we were going through, things that you can do in a group game that are not typical of a scene. Would be like scene painting, anything that's kind of like third person description of the space, or you can also character paint, and narrative in general, like third person narrative, telling a story together. That's kind of more like reader's theater, half acting out, half telling directly to the audience. Is a really nice tool to go to.
There's another version of that I like, where it's just using like a soundboard. So you're establishing the environment using sound. Like, for example, if you're building a hospital, you might make that beeping sound, or the sound of a respirator, or whatever sounds you would hear in either the hospital itself or like the surgical room. And then start using that, then adding lines of dialogue that you might hear within the hospital to kind of almost do like what's that? Goon River type story. But no, like you said, establishing that there's no interaction between the characters. This is all something, if someone were to walk in the hospital and close their eyes, something they might hear and then figure out the story themselves.
Yeah, disconnected snippets of dialogue. And then also physically creating things together, I think is one of the most fun things to do. So like kind of Megatron? What's the thing? Is that the Power Rangers? No.
Oh, Megazord.
Megazord, is that when they assemble into their fighting giant?
Yes.
Okay.
Megatron is the bad guy from Transformers.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, Megazord.
It's the nerdiest thing I said today.
No, let me tell you the difference between Megatron and Megazord.
I'm 41 years old. I should not know this.
But assembly, I love the idea. I remember we did that physicality boot camp, and that was like, wasn't that the opener where like you guys have to quickly create a living creature, or
yes. Yes.
Yeah, and then monologue as that creature while you like find
move
a way to
throughout
make it
the
move.
room.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What's the arms? What's the legs? Where does it talk from? And do you doing creatures that both exist or in real life or fantasy, or just coming up with let's mix up two random creatures and see what that would look like?
Yeah. Any way of getting everyone to, if you're going to use the idea of character, getting everyone to become one thing is a really great way to do character. JTS Brown has like that shared monologue idea of that where somebody starts a monologue and then everyone kind of switches into adopting that character until everybody's kind of like hive mind talking as that character. It's very cool. And I think that I think beyond looking to see shows that have that element in it or giving it practice in class and rehearsals, I think we kind of unpacked all the things that you can do with words on describing it in this conversation. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I think we nailed it. No, it's fun. I like this.
Okay, so I guess we can cut, right?
Yeah.